Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I'm your host, Christian D. Evans. Now, there are countless of consultants and coaches, but this guy, he actually knows what he's doing. And the reason why is because he is actually leading friends with John C. Maxwell. He is a certified individual with the John Maxwell group, and he's a trainer, coach, and speaker, and he's an author for the C-Suite and beyond. Now, the reason why I want to have him on is because most of us have had bad experiences with buying and investing in coaches and consultants, and we don't know really what we don't know. And so sometimes we go to the consultant and say, hey, you know what? This is what I need help with. And they say, okay, cool, wonderful. But this guy actually says, hey, from previous experience, he knows what you need help with. So he tells you on what you want, but also gives you what you need. And that is the reason why I want to have him on. Please welcome my guest, Tom Caresti. How you doing today, Tom?
Super duper. How about you? Just living a dream.
Excited. Well, because again, like I was talking about, we've all had bad experiences. I think we've all just been in a situation where we've invested into something. It's like, oh my gosh, it's regurgitated crap. You can tell, right? With coaches and consultants. But you dive deep into definitely the C-suite kind of content. You're an author. You have an incredible book here. You've been networked with the John Maxwell team for many, many years and doing that. But let's kind of unpack your book for a second here. In this, you dive deep into kind of the four keys of it. If you could tell me just first of all, before we dive into the four keys, give me like one or two things that you have found after consulting and coaching many C-suite. What are the one or two things that most of them get wrong in leading, building, developing, staying consistent?
Well, yeah, before I get into that answer, let me just comment on your introduction. So I was watching, I think it was CNN or Fox News and one of these things, and it was, another one of those Middle East crisis. And, we have our panel of experts, and they get these people on TV, their panel of experts. And, it becomes evident to me very quickly that these panel of experts had never, lived a day outside the US. So how the heck are you an expert in a topic matter where all you've done is study a book and maybe talk to a few people and maybe got on an airplane and hit the ground there for a couple of weeks. So, the why, I think that makes some of the things that I say make sense is because I actually lived it. I've been on the ground. I've lived all over the world. I ran small companies. I ran, a little bit larger companies. So there's a lot to be said for speaking from experience and also, learning from experiences. Didn't learn, my experiences. Like I say, I got my graduate degree from the streets of Eastern Europe, business management, and that's really the difference between a good consultant and somebody who just kind of, because consultants' jobs are pretty easy. They kind of say, hey, you should do this, and then they kind of walk away, and then you're kind of stuck with their mess that they recommended. So yeah, just the one thing that's a little bit different than me is actually I lived it. So when I ask somebody to do something or I recommend somebody to do something, I've been through it. So it's not just from a book. So that kind of makes me a little bit unique, I think, from many other consultants. Now you got to repeat the question again because I went off on a tangent. So about the four keys and about the book and so what do some leaders get wrong at the C-suite? Look, a lot of guys in the C-suite are very, hungry, very energetic, and they're not too humble. And when they're in the C-suite, they don't think they have a problem. So the biggest challenge with the guys up in the C-suite is to say, look, your organization could be working a little better. You could be a better leader. There's things that you can improve. And many C-suite leaders just think they have all the answers. I mean, they're on a rocket ship, they're successful, and they don't see their own blind spots. So the first thing with C-suite leaders is really get them to understand that there may be an issue. They could use some help on some stuff. So just being a little bit more humble is, I think, the biggest challenge for C-suite leaders.
Well, and it's interesting you say blind spots because see what I've noticed, and I've got a lot of like friends that are in the C-suite world. It's pride comes before a fall, right? We get that. And what I found so interesting is sometimes the company has to go and tank with that C-suite leadership, and then they call Tom, right? Then they call you and say, "Hey, I need help," right? And it is a massive failure that then they realize I need to change behavior. And sadly, you can't ever be proactive, right? Because when you're prideful, hey, you know what? I'm blind. I don't care. I'm amazing. I'm best. And correct me if I'm wrong. I would imagine you've gotten numerous phone calls. It's like, "Hey, man, I want you to turn my company around." Well, you should have called me 6 months ago, but now let's figure out the
Well,
damage.
one of the best examples is at one stop in my life, I was actually leading the merger office between two global mergers. One was Reckitt and Coleman, one was Benckiser, and it's a funny story because what happened was, Benckiser was, they named them the quote unquote European Clorox. They were a company that was originally a German company that I went on the Amsterdam Exchange, and we're for a consumer goods company, we're growing about 17, 18% CAGR. So on a rocket ship for a consumer goods company, that those growth rates are no big deal for technology companies, but for a consumer goods company, those were really healthy clips. And then there was another company, an English company that was listed on the London Exchange, and their name was Reckitt and Coleman. And at best, they were stagnating. I mean, just they were having a tough time. And guess what their board did? I mean, Benckiser was growing. They were looking for acquisitions, and Reckitt and Coleman board was smart enough to say, okay, well, instead of kind of just firing our executive team, let's just do this global merger, where, for lack of a better definition, it became a minority takeover, right? So the global merger goes through, and guess what? All the people that were leading Reckitt and Coleman, they're all gone, and all the people that were leading Benckiser led the company, the new company, the merged company. So that's a prime example where if you don't humble yourself, if you don't seek advice, if you don't try to do it differently, there are things out there that's called, boards for larger companies and even for smaller companies. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a startup, please surround yourself with a board. Don't try to do it yourself. Get some, industry smart people on your board. They can make introductions for you. They can kind of guide you if you're making mistakes. And in that case, with Reckitt and Coleman and Benckiser, the board just said, okay, enough is enough. Let's do it a little bit different way, and they voted him out.
Well, let's talk a little bit about humility, because what I found so interesting is so many people talk about that, but they don't know exactly what that looks like in the organization. So if you could unpack that for us.
Well, the easiest way to be humble is to get humbled, right? In the corporate world, I mean, I was an expat for probably about 25 years, and through that 25 years in the expat world, you have about 3 years to get things right. And if you don't get them right in 3 years, you get fired. I mean, it's that's kind of simple, and getting fired is about as humbling as it gets, right? If you do a good job in 3 years, then usually they plop you out and do something bigger and better. So, as a C-suite executive, I would think that in order to reach that plateau, you've had some failures in your life, and failures in your life kind of set you straight and make you humble. Right now, also what makes me humble, a whole different topic. I don't know if your audience is into this, but I'm a guy of faith. So I believe in Jesus Christ, and, I've been humbled in many times in my life. And I stay humbled because of my faith. That's one of the reasons, but that's a total different tangent that, we don't need to go down at that avenue. But if you're a C-suite, in order for you to get there, I know that somewhere in your life you failed at least once or twice, and hopefully you learn from it. And hopefully you were humbled a little bit, and you got grounded back to earth when you went through that failure.
Well, what I find so interesting is humility is a learned trait, right? Because it's like one of those things, like if we know pride comes before a fall and we lose everything, and then when we start realizing we're prideful, then we start, okay, that's a red flag. And so in order to decrease that, we need to say, okay, we need to increase humility. And what does that look like, right? Just being gracious and gratitude and grateful for what I do have, and not being sitting there cocky and knowing everything, being all that stuff. Now, what I do find interesting, though, is there is a confidence humility where, hey, I am confident in the direction where we're going, right? And so sometimes people can come off cockiness and confident, but also it is, hey, humbly acknowledging what I've been able to do, but then coming in humility and saying, hey, you know what, I'm always open to, hey, I'm open to the road to get to that result, but I am not non-negotiable with that result. And if you could help us understand that a little bit as well, from your years of coaching and consulting C-suite.
Well, there's a couple of things come to mind. The first thing is I prescribe to what I call a servant leadership model, and a servant leadership model recognizes the fact that it's not about what you do, it's not about your ideas. It's really more about serving your customers, serving your team. So in that, for example, when I was CEO of a $400 million company, I thought I had the easiest job in the room, because my job really kind of boiled down to make sure that culture and vision, people bought into it. They understood what their role was in that, and really for me to equip them, support them, so that they could be successful at their specific little task or project or department or whatever that may be. So that really was my job, is just to make sure everybody was on the same page. We're all rowing in the same direction. And it wasn't like, okay, Tom had this brilliant idea and everybody do what Tom's brilliant idea is. No, that's not the way it works. It's really getting the right people in the room, coming up with the ideas. That's a shared idea. Everybody buys into it. Now we're all rowing in the same direction. And as a CEO, okay, let me equip my team, whether it's with assets, whether it's with training or learning, whether it's my physical support. Hey, Tom, can you come and see this large customer with me? I need your support. Sitting down, across the table with, one of the big buyers for Walmart or something. So it was that kind of support for my customers, for my employees. And that's really the certain leadership mindset that I have is, look, it's not about me. It's about something much bigger than me. And if you buy into the idea that it's all about you, then you're not humble enough. Try imagining something much bigger than you. Because businesses are much bigger than you. I love Warren Buffett's his quote. It says, "Look, I invest in companies with strong brands, because strong brands can withstand a dummy running the company, and one day a dummy will run that company, right?" So strong brands, that kind of takes it. A brand is much bigger than the CEO of the company, right? So kind of same idea. It's much bigger than you, and if you think it's about you, then yeah, you probably are not on the right path.
Yeah, and in this book here, you really break down what traits and experiences those at the highest level of an organization are looking for in an individual. And maybe now go ahead and now we identify what they struggle with and what a red flag is, and saying, hey, if you struggle with this, then you need to implement humility. But what are those other 4 keys of leadership success for the C-suite, would you suggest?
Well, the 4 keys I write in the book is, the first key. Well, actually, even before we get this first key, what the 4 keys help you is to influence others. And in the end, we're all in the influence game, right? Whether you're a salesperson trying to influence a purchasing person, or whether you're a purchasing person trying to influence a salesperson, whether you're a marketing director in front of a boardroom doing a presentation trying to influence the board about your ideas. But it's life is all about influence, and what the 4 keys allow you to do is really help you influence others, and expand your circle of influence. And I always say, look, in life there's a circle of influence and a circle of reaction. And we should spend a lot more time on our circle of influence instead of reacting to, all the begging calls of everybody else, which is our circle of reaction. So these 4 keys help you increase your circle of influence. And what are they? So the first one is your character. And the synonymous with a character is a culture in an organization. That pretty much boils down to the same thing. And character is built on your values, just like a culture or an organization is built on shared values. And key for leaders is to understand that people buy into your character, and at beginning they start following you. And what do I mean by that? When I was working for Fortune 100s, the fact that I worked for a strong brand invited people, whenever I wanted to hire somebody, I would have, Harvard MBAs, Oxford MBAs, pile into the room and sign up with their resumes. Say, hey, we'd love to work for you. And it wasn't they wanted to work for me. They wanted to work for that particular company because it was a great brand. It was a great company to work for. And then many, many years later, when I left, the corporations and I started my own business, I was trying to hire somebody, and everybody was like, "Well, who the hell are you, and why should we work for you?" Right? I go, who's Tom Caresti, and why should I work for Tom Caresti? Okay, it's one thing to work for a Colgate-Palmolive or a Reckitt Benckiser, but who the heck is Tom? And people have to realize that whether you're an entrepreneur in a small organization or you're a CEO of an organization, in the beginning, people will buy into you. And I remember as a junior executive working for Fortune 100, we got this new VP that came in and, high flyer. He came in from Procter and Gamble with lots of good experience. And the first thing he did was he kind of just stood outside the office and said, "Hey, I'm Larry." And he told us about his kids, about his values, and, he didn't talk about, his success in, which obviously he had. He didn't talk about the business plan. He just basically said, "This is who I am." And it was very informal. It was just around, his front door, and we all kind of gather around it. And this is a very large organization. And and I said to myself, what a healthy dose of reality where, guy is just like, "This is who I am, get to know me. I want to get to know you, and I want to support you, and I hope you can support me." And that's a formula that I always used. Whenever I showed up in a new job or a new leadership role, the first thing I always did was just, form a little circle with everybody and say, "Hey, this is who I am. And I'd love to get to know you, and I'd love to get to your support." So people buy into you, and I don't care if you're a CEO or just a middle-level manager. The first step is they buy into you. And then, yeah, go ahead. Back to you.
No, that makes perfect sense. I'm just taking notes over here because, see, what I always found so interesting is the concept of influence, right? Because with influence, you get this buy-in. But one of the things that I always found so interesting about influence is it may not be you, but it may be someone that already has the influence established in that ecosystem, that is the person you need to connect with or talk to. So, for example, I was talking to a friend of mine that is in corporate America, and she was kind of struggling with her boss a little bit and saying, "Hey, you know what? I want a leadership position," and talking about it. We've been talking about this for the last 6 months and nothing's really developed. And this other person that has not been here longer has got a lot more. And I was talking to her. I said, "Well, unpack this for me. When people have questions, do they come to you? When there's a problem, do they come to you?" Right? And the point I was making was, are you influential? Because sometimes that supersedes leadership, right? And the reality is, in order to, you're a leader, but you may not have that, that little designation, right, in corporate, or you may not have that designation in your job, whatever. Maybe you do have that, that leadership, but then maybe you don't have influence. And what I always find so interesting is, just like you were saying, is, you want to make sure you really establish influence, but with that comes with, like what you were talking about, is that self-identity. Hey, I'm more than just a CEO. I'm more than, a $10 million man. And I'm more than whatever, right? It is, hey, I go fishing with my grandkids. I go fishing with this. I love fishing, right? And it's that concept of, I think, the authenticity, and that kind of plays into a little bit of influence, being authentic with people and say, "Hey, I struggle with the same thing, right? I'm not this perfect person." Is that what you have found as well? I'd love to get your response on that.
Well, look, many people make the mistake that say, "Look, I will be a better leader when I get the corner office. I will be a better leader when I get the title." And that could be furthest from the truth. In fact, it's the total opposite. It's always, I mean, look at the Oval Office of the United States. And I don't care if you like to dislike the orange hair guy, or like to dislike the senile old guy that's in the office now, or their predecessor. The office is the office, and you have some great presidents, or you have some shitty presidents. All right, because just because a man occupies that office, it doesn't make him a great leader of the free world, right? Maybe a total flop. But the office is the office. So the office is not going to make the person. The person is going to make that office. And that's a mistake that everybody makes. And one of the stories I share a lot of times is a number of years ago, I walked into a mergers and acquisitions meeting, and everybody walks into the meeting, and as usual, everybody exchanges their cards, and the VP of acquisitions and VP of marketing and CFO, and everybody's like kind of throwing their their cards around. Here's this guy Mike, and Mike doesn't have any cards. All right, so Mike doesn't hang out any cards, and in about 15-20 minutes into the meeting, it becomes apparent to me that if anything's going to happen from the other side, it's going to go through Mike. I don't know who Mike is. He doesn't have business cards, but just by the way he's conducting himself, the way other people are reacting to him, he's the guy, right? And he didn't have a title. At the end of the meeting, I actually got his card, and it just said Mike on it. Still didn't say a title on it, just said Mike. But he was the guy of influence in that room. So just just for all your listeners, when you get a title for your business card, when you get a title for your new job, it's meaningless. What's meaningful is, what do you make of that? Now, certainly, there's a period of time where you get a benefit of the doubt of that title. So you get a new promotion and you become a vice president of marketing, let's say. Along with that title will come a period of time where people will give you the benefit of the doubt. You quote unquote, you borrow influence from that title, right? But you have to live up to that, because there's two things in the world, right? There's one thing in the world that's called your character, and there's a second thing in the world which is called your reputation. Now, your character and your reputation are going to line up when you first borrow that title, right? Because people will give you the benefit of the doubt. But then over a period of time, and that may be a short period of time or a longer period of time, where people see how you react in certain situations, especially during stressful situations. And that's how you develop your reputation. And in an ideal world, good leaders, their character and their reputation line up. In a world where a leader's character and reputation does not line up, I can guarantee you they're not going to be a leader for a long time.
Well, one of the things dealing with higher level C-suite, something that I've learned from working with a lot of business owners, right? It is ego, right? And what I've discovered is, and this is a tactic of mine, is you want to stroke the ego, acknowledge the ego a little bit, but then also when they say something negative or high emotion or something like that, you cannot, as a C-suite, or even as like a business owner or someone that runs a successful business, you cannot attack that at the same emotional level. You have to be the one that's mature enough to take it, embrace it, and then be able to be slow with your words and response. Is that what you have found as well? And being that more mature aspect, definitely with working with higher level, I mean, like take for example the merger and acquisition. There's probably some tough conversations that have to happen, negotiation, things like that. People say things that they may or may not regret later, and there's just high emotion in a lot of business deals, in your community, even in the infrastructure of the business. So I would love to kind of get your response in regards to just being more of a mature leader, and not just having that influence, but more mature, embracing it and being slow with responding non-emotionally.
Well, it was, many years ago, I was a middle level manager, and I worked for a really brilliant guy who was a senior level director. His name was Frank, and we were working on initiatives at that time about really identifying brand equities, and which categories do we focus on to grow, and which categories maybe we divest from in the future, or at least make smaller investments in those brands. And we went to the meeting with a senior level marketing guy, and we were kind of running this idea by him, because he was marketing and we were more support. So we were running this idea by him to get his support to go to the next level higher. And about, just about as we finishing and wrapping up, I turned to him, I said, and I think his name was also Mike, but Michael or something. So I said, so Michael, are you aboard with this? And he kind of just looked at me and he says, well, hell yeah, it was my idea in the first place. So Frank just basically, tapped me on the knee and, just to calm me down. And we said, look, again, servant leadership, it wasn't about whose idea it was. If the guy is, if he's a, self-centered, egotistical maniac and he wants to claim the idea, it wasn't his, sure, I don't care. As long as it goes forward and it moves and the objectives are achieved. So again, if you think it's about you, then you make the mistake. If it's something much bigger than you, then I think you're on the right path.
Yeah, and it's just dealing with people, and you got to learn how to deal with people because, like you said, I mean, we hear and we say that humility. We say, obviously, striking, developing these tactics and influence and so forth. But at the end of the day, you still run in and deal with people that aren't have any humble traits. They are very prideful. They are very egotistical, and so they're sadly they are still in the workplace. And so you got to figure out, how do I be the mature one to still get the end result, whatever that is, finishing that project. Tom, tell me of an example of someone that did not implement these strategies or did not implement some of your consulting. One, you probably had to fire that client, but two, what was the result that produced because they were not implemented? They were being stubborn, they weren't being authentic, they didn't share with you certain things that were very viable in the during that time of improvement or whatever.
Well, look, as a consultant, all you can do is kind of look at the landscape and go off the information that they give you, right? And then once they give you that information, then you basically make some recommendations. Rarely do you really see your full plan being implemented and seeing the fruits of success. But the one example maybe I could share with you is I was working with a bank, and they brought me in to it was a small boutique bank, and they brought me in to help them with their strategy sessions. And what I found out that their growth strategy, the obstacle to their growth strategy was very simple. They had comprised of a team that were all like individuals. And look, in the banking industry, a lot of financial people, so it makes sense that they're highly analytical. The issue was with this particular boutique bank is their whole team was highly analytical. So any new project that they wanted to do, they would just analyze the crap out of it and they would never get off the ground. So it really wasn't about the strategic plan. It was really about the team. And that really was my recommendation to the CEO there to say, look, until you mix up the team and you get different diversity of thought in your team, it doesn't matter what, it could be the best project on earth that you put in front of them. They're going to analyze the crap out of it and they're going to kill it, because they just, they're analytical people, are not good at making decisions. They're good at analyzing stuff, and they just want to analyze and get more data and analyze and get more data. You need to balance your team with some, action oriented in the DISC methodology. Get a couple of high Ds in there that want to move and push that push that thing forward. So that was my recommendation. Whether or not they actually broke up the team and mixed it up, I really couldn't tell you. But that's maybe one example that comes close to what your question is.
That's incredible. And because at the end of the day, even though someone like yourself that has immense experience, that have enough data to say, hey, you're going the wrong direction, people still don't follow through. So I know we talked a little bit, a few other keys and tactics. If you would kind of walk through a little bit, a few more other tactics that you have talk about in the book.
Sure. So just one last thought on character. I say this to many on podcasts, and I also would encourage each one of your listeners to answer 3 questions, because that will help them become a better influencer or a better leader. So the first question is, who are you? And I already answered that to you. I said, look, I'm a servant leader. That's who I am. But understand who you are. And then the second question is, what is your passion? So my passion is making things better. I love making products better. I like making companies better. I like making, executives better. So, I want to add value to people's lives now, whether it's through products or other methodology. And the third one is, what are you good at? And I'm pretty good at mentoring and leading. All right. So why is that important? Well, look, if you want people, if you want to be a leader of people and you want people to follow you, well, if you don't know who you are, they don't know who you are, it's going to be difficult for them to buy into you. Right. And then second is, if you're not passionate about something, why in God's name would anybody on your team be passionate about it either? Right. So, Tom doesn't look too passionate about this, so why should I do it? I mean, he's not really riled up about it. And the third one is, what are you good at? Well, incompetence. Nobody wants to follow incompetence, right? So you better be good at what you're doing. So Just to kind of round up that character, culture issues is, answer those three questions. You may not have the answers to them now, but start working on them. Because if you really want people to follow you and you want people to buy into you, you got to have those three nailed down. Go ahead.
No, this is incredible. This is incredible. And so when you're walking through that a little bit, do they focus on one trait first, or do they focus all at the same time to make it consistent pattern?
Well, I think you need the answers to all three, right? The first one is just figure out who you are. I remember some Google senior executive who was a vice president, really some marketing guy really high up in Google. You read and he had a wife and 4 beautiful kids, and then you read in the paper that he overdoses on a boat with a hooker and on heroin. Like, who the heck are you? How many lives are you living? And look, to that extent, I know a lot of guys who hate their jobs and punch the clock 9 to 5. I mean, I'm talking about senior executives that really don't like the environment they're in, but pays the bills, and they're kind of sunk into it because they've got $10,000-$15,000 a month mortgages, so they got to bring their paychecks to make those bills meet, but they hate what they're doing. So and that's just a shame to go through life with that. So look, if you don't have those three questions right, what you're going to find yourself is you may be in a job, you may be even in a career, right? But you won't be doing your calling. If you answer those three questions and you have clarity on them, I think you have a good chance of actually living what your calling is.
So powerful, so powerful. And I want to kind of talk a little bit about this because you did mention this. With your story, and I normally don't bring this up because this is a business podcast, but you did bring it up. And so if you could unpack the importance of biblical leadership in the workplace. And obviously a lot of these character traits and things like that we discussed are found in biblical leadership. And so what have you learned throughout your life on, and maybe even certain things that you struggle with in your own story that you had to really dial in, discipline yourself to really focus on those biblical leadership?
Well, look, there's many companies who use biblical leadership principles. They don't even know they're using them, right? In the 80s, I was working for Colgate-Palmolive, and they brought in Stephen Covey. Well, Stephen Covey is basically a Mormon, and he was putting Mormon principles into modern business. John Maxwell, you mentioned, right? John Maxwell was a preacher in the pulpit, now is a preacher in the business world, and all those principles, whether it's John Maxwell principles, Stephen Covey principles, or Tom Caresi principles, they're biblically based, and there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with servant leadership is a biblically based principle. It works great in business, right? Customer service, put the customers first. It's a business concept. So, if you never read the Bible, pick up the book of Proverbs. Just fun, simple one-liners in Proverbs that help you realize about cheating and dishonest gain and stuff like that, which is again biblically based. But look at what happened to Enron when Enron cheated people and tried to cook the books. They went belly under. Look at Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A has a great product, treats their customers right, and it's a thriving business all over the world. Right? They're franchising everywhere. So faith is in a lot of businesses, but people may not even realize that the culture they're creating, the vision they're creating, is actually biblically based. One quick story for you that I like to use from the Bible. I mean, I don't know how many of your listeners are read the Bible, but in the Old Testament there's a story about Moses, and Moses's father-in-law Jethro comes and looks at Moses and says, "Moses, man, you're burning out. You're working too hard. You're trying to do everything yourself. This is never going to work. You're just going to burn out. But here's what you should do." Right? He says to Moses, "Look, get judges and put them in groups of 10, and then teach them the laws, and then have them decide all the easy cases and only bring you the most difficult cases to decide." right? So there's management 101. How do you put together a management team? So what if you kind of dive just a little bit deeper than that? It says, look, get judges and put them in groups of 10. Look at any organization. About the maximum number of reportees you can have is about 10. You know, you look at the CEO, CFO, CIO, et cetera, CMO. And then when there's geographies and other things that as organizations grow, usually what happens is the chief marketing officer reports into the chief operating officer, right? So look, any functional organization, you have about 10 or less people reporting to you. If you got more, then you really are a manager or supervisor. You're not really a leader, right? So 10 is a great number, right? Then the second thing is, you know, Moses, Joshua says to Moses is teach them the laws. So look, just don't get, and I'm sorry, I also misquoted, it says get the 10 most capable people, right? So higher quality, don't just hire bodies, and then mentor them, train them, you know, equip them so, you know, they're good at what they're doing, and then delegate to them, let them make the, you know, decide those easiest cases and only bring the most difficult cases to you, right? And that's, you know, just how you put a management team together, and that's how you run a team. And it's, you know, from Moses' day, so that goes back a couple of thousand years.
And what's so just like you said, Proverbs is just it's miraculous. And one of the things I've learned in the last like 19 to 24 months is almost this concept of like I call it like Forrest Gump stupidity, where it's like you listen to a proverb or you read it and say, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to focus on, oh well, what if this happens? No, just do it. And it's consistency, right? If we know, you know, pride comes before a fall. Okay, well, the humility is the key. If we know like certain things, it's like, okay, wonderful, focus on that and make that happen. And it's just the same thing with finances, right? It's, or even like losing weight. We know at the end of the day, okay, hey, we need to work out, eat less. Cool, wonderful, right? There are certain other attributes behind that, but there's also like same thing with investing. Hey, just spend less than you actually make, and then you'll do very well long term, right? And it's just very interesting when we simplify our life, we make it overcomplicated. We're always trying to think of the short way, the get rich, whatever. Oh, we're going to build a big organization. We're going to have amazing culture. We're going to have, you know, whatever. Everything is a process and an optimization. And so once we look at that on a day-to-day format, instead of, hey, this is the end result, I'm humble now, wonderful, I've achieved it. No, it's over the rest of my life, it is a consistent daily habitual thing that I have to learn and do every single day. Same thing with influence. I have to love on people. I have to build relationships every single day. It's not, oh, wonderful, I'm influential now, right? You know, like, oh, I got 1,000, you know, TikTok. And so I just I just think it's so awesome that we're talking about this, Tom. Is there anything else that you want to add in regards to this subject?
Oh, I don't know. We have a limited time, so I think I could just ramble on for hours and hours and hours. So I'll let you lead the discussion, and I'll
Yeah, how
keep it
can
to short answers.
yeah, no worries. How can our audience reach out to you, Tom?
It's pretty easy. I'm blessed and cursed with a last name that's pretty unique. So if you look at Kereszti, and that's Kereszti, you Google it, you find my sister and my 2 daughters. That's about it. So pretty easy to track me down. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on my website. If you just go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble or some of the online booksellers and look for C-Suite and Beyond, the 4 Keys to Leadership Success, you know, you can find the book. And, you know, on either on my website or LinkedIn, just look, drop me a line. I'm happy to spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes on the phone with you on a Zoom call. You could tell me about what's bugging you, what's troubling you. And I mean, I'd be able to help you, but, you know, it's 20, 10, 15, 20 minutes of your time, my time we invested, and I may be able to help you. I don't know.
Awesome, guys. Those links will be in the description below. So make sure you just click on that. Make sure you get in his ecosystem and reach out to Tom. And Tom, I always like to ask my guests before we let you go, I just appreciate the immense value that you brought today, unpacking those 4 traits and characteristics, and really just also bringing some red flags to our life and realizing, okay, if we struggle with this, we definitely need to make sure that this is on our forefront to deal with it. But Tom, is there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, wisdom. Wisdom is learn from your mistakes. We talked about the 3 questions that were very important. I would throw one more thing in there. We didn't talk about vision a lot, but I wish when I was 20, somebody said, Tom, what's the vision for your life? And now I have one today. It says leader men, man of God, leader men. So it's pretty simple. Man of God, leader men. Anything that I do is going to honor God, and anything that I do is going to have a leadership role. And that helps me make major decisions in life, because I just wanted that easy statement and said, should I do this or should I not do this? So I encourage everybody to come up with a vision statement for your life.
And that is my friend, the one and only Tom. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Until next time, be uncommon if you can.
All right. Thank you.